Sit there. It's closer to the exit, my mom snapped, pointing to a wobbly stool by the restroom. That way you don't ruin any photos. They all laughed. Then the $2,200 bill came and landed in front of me. I just leaned back and proclaimed, "Don't worry. I didn't want to ruin the symmetry of your check, either." They started arguing, voices getting louder, but I was already advancing out. I, 32M, never thought I'd be the one writing this kind of post, but here we are. My family has always treated me like the family disappointment, and last weekend they finally crossed a line I didn't even know existed. My cousin was getting married at some upscale restaurant downtown, the kind of place where they charge $40 for a piece of fish the size of your thumb. I knew I was walking into hostile territory the moment I stepped through those glass doors. Mom spotted me first. She was already seated at the main table, wearing that fake smile she reserves for public humiliation. The moment our eyes met, her expression shifted to pure disgust. She didn't even wait for me to approach before she started pointing toward the back corner of the restaurant. She told me to sit on that wobbly stool by the restroom because it was closer to the exit, making some snide comment about how that way I wouldn't ruin any of their photos. The entire table erupted in laughter. My aunt nearly choked on her wine. My uncle slapped his knee like it was the funniest thing he'd ever heard, and even some cousins I barely knew were snickering behind their hands. I should mention that I've been the family scapegoat for years. After Dad died when I was 15, Mom remarried within 8 months to a guy who never wanted kids around. My stepfather made it clear from day one that I was just baggage that came with the package. Mom chose him over me every single time. They shipped me off to my grandmother's house when I was 16, claiming they needed space for their new life together. I worked my way through community college, then state school, graduated with a business degree, and started my own small consulting firm 3 years ago. Nothing spectacular, but I'm making decent money and I'm proud of what I've built. But to them, I'll always be the unwanted reminder of Mom's first marriage. So there I was, perched on this ridiculous stool that belonged in a dive bar, not a high-end restaurant. Every few minutes someone would walk by to use the restroom and give me these pitying looks, like I was some charity case who'd wandered in off the street. The wedding party carried on without me. They toasted the happy couple, shared stories about family traditions, and made elaborate plans for future gatherings. All while I sat there like furniture, close enough to hear everything but far enough away to make it clear I wasn't really part of it. I watched my half-brother give a heartfelt speech about family bonds and unconditional love. The irony wasn't lost on me. This is the same guy who used to tell people we weren't really related when we were kids. About halfway through dinner, I noticed something interesting. The waiter kept bringing the check updates to Mom's end of the table, and she kept waving him away with increasing irritation. I could see her whispering urgently to my stepfather, who was shaking his head and pointing at his wallet. That's when it hit me. They'd planned this whole elaborate dinner at an expensive restaurant, invited the entire extended family, ordered premium everything, and somehow forgot to budget for the actual bill. I pulled out my phone and did some quick math. 32 people, appetizers, multiple courses, premium bar service, wine pairings, the special wedding cake they'd ordered. We were looking at somewhere between $2,200 and $2,500. The waiter approached their table again, this time with more urgency. I could see Mom's face getting redder by the minute. She kept glancing around the table, probably hoping someone would volunteer to split the massive bill she'd created. But here's the thing about my family. They're all talk when it comes to big gestures, but their wallets snap shut the moment real money is involved. I watched cousin after cousin suddenly become very interested in their phones or excuse themselves to the restroom. Finally, the waiter walked over to me. He looked embarrassed as he explained that the party host had requested the check be brought to me instead. The total was $2,218. I stared at that number for a long moment. $2,200. More than I spend on groceries in 3 months. All because they'd planned some grand celebration they couldn't afford and decided their family disappointment would pick up the tab. The restaurant had gone quiet. Everyone was watching me, waiting to see how I'd handle being stuck with their mess. I looked up at the waiter, then at my family's table where 31 pairs of eyes were fixed on me with various expressions of expectation, embarrassment, and barely concealed hope. That's when I said it. I told them not to worry, that I didn't want to ruin the symmetry of their check either. Then I stood up, grabbed my jacket, and started walking toward the exit. The eruption behind me was immediate. Voices started rising, chairs scraped against the floor, and I could hear Mom calling my name with increasing desperation. But I didn't turn around. I made it to my car before my phone started buzzing. Text after text, call after call. All variations of the same theme. How could I embarrass the family like this? How could I leave them stranded? Didn't I have any sense of responsibility? The restaurant manager apparently gave them 2 hours to sort out payment before involving the police. I found this out later through a string of increasingly frantic voicemails. Update 1. The fallout has been nuclear. It's been 5 days since the restaurant incident, and my phone has been buzzing nonstop with calls, texts, and social media messages from relatives I haven't heard from in years. The most interesting call came from my uncle, Mom's brother, who'd been laughing the hardest when they stuck me at that stool. He started off angry, demanding to know how I could leave family stranded like that. But when I asked him why he didn't offer to pay if family was so important, his tone changed completely. Turns out he'd already maxed out his credit cards on his own kids' college tuition. My aunt, who was choking on her wine, she's been secretly borrowing money from her retirement fund to keep up appearances. Cousin after cousin had the same story. They're all living paycheck to paycheck, but spending money they don't have to maintain this image of family prosperity. The restaurant manager eventually worked out a payment plan with them after my stepfather had to call his business partner for an emergency loan. They're paying it off over 6 months with interest. But here's where it gets interesting. My half-brother called yesterday, and for the first time in our lives, he wasn't calling to mock me or ask for something. He apologized. He told me he'd always felt guilty about how the family treated me, but he was too scared of becoming the new target to speak up. After watching me walk out on their financial mess, he realized something had to change. He's been doing the math on family gatherings over the past few years. Every single expensive dinner, every elaborate celebration, every family tradition that costs hundreds of dollars, they've all ended with someone scrambling to cover costs they'd never planned for. Last Christmas, my stepfather complained for weeks about the credit card bill from their modest family dinner that ended up costing $800. The year before that, Mom borrowed money from 3 different relatives to pay for my cousin's graduation party. They've been living in this fantasy world where they throw money around like they're wealthy, then panic when the bills come due. My half-brother asked me something that caught me completely off guard. He wanted to know how I learned to walk away from situations like that. He said he's been trapped in this cycle of trying to meet their expectations and never having enough money to actually enjoy his life. I told him about the years after I moved out, when I had to learn the difference between being alone and being lonely. About working 2 jobs while finishing school because no one was coming to rescue me. About the freedom that comes with only being responsible for your own choices. He went quiet for a long time, then asked if we could meet for coffee sometime. Just the 2 of us, away from the family drama. Meanwhile, Mom has been calling me daily, alternating between tearful apologies and furious accusations. She wants me to understand that she was just trying to include me in the celebration, that she never meant for things to get so out of hand. But then she'll slip up and reveal what she really thinks. Yesterday, she said if I'd just acted like a normal family member instead of being so sensitive about where I was sitting, none of this would have happened. There it was. According to Mom, I'm still the problem. Not the fact that they planned an expensive dinner they couldn't afford. Not the way they treated me like a piece of furniture. My fault for being sensitive about public humiliation. Update 2. 2 weeks have passed, and the family dynamic has completely shifted. What started as revenge has turned into something I never expected, liberation for more than just me. My half-brother and I met for coffee last Saturday. We talked for 3 hours, and I learned things about our family that I'd never suspected. He told me that Mom and my stepfather have been using emotional manipulation to get family members to pay for things for years. When my cousin got engaged, they pressured her fiancé's family into paying for the rehearsal dinner by claiming it was tradition, and that refusing would be disrespectful. When my aunt wanted to skip a family vacation because money was tight, they made her feel so guilty about breaking up the family that she went anyway and spent money she didn't have. The restaurant incident was supposed to be the same playbook. Stick me with the bill, then make me feel guilty if I complained about it. They probably figured I'd pay up just to avoid causing a scene. But walking away broke the pattern, and now other family members are starting to see it too. My cousin, the bride whose wedding started this whole mess, called me yesterday. She'd just found out that Mom had told the restaurant I was paying, without asking me first. She was horrified. She also revealed something that explained a lot. Mom had been telling everyone that I was doing really well financially and could easily afford to treat the family. She'd been building up this narrative for weeks, convincing people that I was some kind of success story who should be grateful for the chance to give back. The truth is, my consulting firm is doing okay, but I'm not wealthy. I live in a modest apartment, drive a used car, and save money by cooking at home and avoiding expensive restaurants. The financial stability I've built comes from being careful with money, not from having unlimited resources. My cousin apologized for not questioning the seating arrangement or the assumption that I'd pay. She said she was so focused on her wedding day that she didn't think about how uncomfortable the situation must have been for me. Then she said something that really stuck with me. She asked why I'd never told anyone in the family about my business or my life in general. She realized she knew almost nothing about what I'd been doing for the past decade. The answer was simple: no one had ever asked. Every family gathering, every phone call, every interaction was about what I could do for them or how I was falling short of their expectations. My actual life, my interests, my achievements, none of that mattered to them. But the biggest surprise came 3 days ago. Mom called, and for the first time in years, she wasn't asking for anything or complaining about something. She wanted to apologize, really apologize, for how she'd treated me. She told me she'd been talking to a therapist. Apparently, the stress of the restaurant incident and the family upheaval had finally pushed her to seek help. The therapist had asked her to describe her relationship with each of her children, and when she got to me, she realized she couldn't do it. She knew my age, where I lived, what I did for work, but she couldn't describe who I was as a person. She couldn't name my interests, my goals, my fears, my dreams. After 32 years, she'd never bothered to actually know her own son. The conversation was awkward and painful, but it felt real in a way our interactions hadn't been in decades. She admitted that she'd been treating me like a convenient target for her frustrations ever since Dad died. That she'd let her own grief and resentment turn me into a symbol of everything that had gone wrong in her life. She asked if we could start over, slowly, with no expectations on either side. I told her I was willing to try, but that things would have to be different. No more financial ambushes, no more public humiliation, no more using me as the family scapegoat. If she wanted a relationship with me, it had to be based on mutual respect. She agreed, and we've had 2 phone conversations since then that were actually pleasant. We talked about my business, her therapy, even some memories of Dad that didn't end in tears or accusations. My stepfather, on the other hand, is still furious about the restaurant bill and has been telling anyone who'll listen that I'm selfish and ungrateful. But his opinion stopped mattering to me years ago. The family gatherings have gotten smaller and more genuine. The people who actually want to spend time together are making an effort, while the ones who were just going through the motions have faded away. And my half-brother and I have been meeting regularly for coffee or lunch. He started setting boundaries with the family's financial demands, and he seems happier than I've seen him in years. Sometimes the best thing you can do for people is refuse to enable their worst behavior. Walking away from that restaurant bill wasn't just about my pride. It was about forcing everyone to confront the dysfunction they'd been perpetuating for years. I'm not saying our family is fixed. We have decades of damage to work through, and some relationships may never recover. But for the first time in my adult life, I feel like I have a choice in how I engage with them. And that choice, it turns out, is worth more than $2,200.